Yesterday we talked about the history, the events around the Declaration of Independence. Today we're going to look at what it says. But this is one of those pages where the lovely computer disagreed with me. So, fine, I am going to have you help me make the computer do what needs to be done. First of all, July and a day and a year need to be part of what you know. As well, there are 3 other dates that you have to know. We're going to jot those down at the bottom. This is a year when Columbus sailed. So you put the year here and then we'll say that's Columbus. Then we need the year that Jamestown Colony was founded. Remember, that's not a 2-year-old talking. That just means it got started. So Jamestown Colony. Oops, that's an N. Sure it is. And finally, we need to know the year the P's came to P. The Pilgrims came to Plymouth. The P's came to P in what year? You should know those. I want you to pause the video and get something written down in each of them. All right, here's your answers. July 4th, 1776 was the Declaration of Independence. That's the United States birthday. The year for Columbus, 1492. Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Yes, it's 14, not 1942. That would be 500 years difference. And yeah, 1492. Jamestown, 1607. 1 plus 6, 07. There's a way to remember that. The P's came to P in 1620. With those years reviewed, now we need to make up for the computer. Letter A should be here at the beginning. Letter B is the second one. C is your third main idea, and D is the fourth main idea. The computer does not know the alphabet in order, and the weird thing is it shows up with the correct letters on my screen, so I have no idea how to fix it. And we'll wait for the bell to stop ringing. All right, so what did the Declaration of Independence say? Well, it started with a preamble. All right, so the preamble is the introduction. Intro. The preamble told why the Declaration of Independence was being written. And basically it said we want to explain why we want to be our own country, why we want to be independent of England. The next section was longer. This is where Thomas Jefferson and the rest of Continental Congress declared the rights that were given by the Creator to all people. This should sound familiar. This is the section that you have to memorize, that at least part of it is taken from it. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So this is just a little bit of a different way of outlining those rights in hopefully easier to understand words. So equality has to do with due process, the equal protection of the laws. They can't say the law is going to protect 10-year-olds differently than it protects 11-year-olds. The idea of having a right to life, having the right to someone not being able to take away your life, that's kind of self-explanatory, the right to life. The importance of liberty, your freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, pursuit of happiness. By this, the founders mostly meant property, that you could only be forced to pay taxes by people that you had voted for. and that government could not just take away your property because the government thinks that is convenient. The idea that the government protects the rights of individuals. All of these are easily found right there in the Declaration of Independence. And then the idea, the founders wrote this in, the idea that United States citizens should be able to change the government when the government uses its power without authority, when the government goes beyond what it's supposed to do. The Declaration of Independence says, hey, we should change governments. And the example that they use is if there's a pattern of the government taking away individuals' rights. With that as the basis, then, they wrote into the Declaration of Independence a list of all of the things, all of the evidence that England had been using its power without authority. So they said, all right, first of all, here's what we think should happen. These are rights that should not be taken away. If the government takes away those rights, we think people should change the government. And now, and this is actually the longest part of the Declaration of Independence, here is everything England has done that has taken away the rights that we as human beings have. And so they base this in history. Some of these, you should recognize what they were talking about. They said England made it hard for the colonists to meet to make laws. Remember when Boston was shut down, the Massachusetts Assembly was not allowed to meet? England had tried to stop the colonists from moving west. This we talked about a bit with the end of the French and Indian War and Pontiac's Rebellion. As a result of Pontiac's Rebellion, England drew a line at the Appalachian Mountains and said, you can't move past this. The colonists are saying, hey, wait a minute, that's government. When government says you can't go someplace, the government is taking away your liberty, your freedom. That's not okay. And then they said that the government had taken away the right to jury trials. When the soldiers were marching out from Lexington and Concord to arrest Sam Adams and John Hancock, the plan was to take them immediately to England. They didn't want to keep them. I love those bells. They didn't want to keep Sam Adams and John Hancock in the colonies for a trial because they knew most of the patriots in the colonies didn't think Sam Adams and John Hancock had done anything wrong. So England took away the guarantee that Sam Adams and John Hancock would have a jury trial. The Declaration of Independence argued that England let their soldiers get away with murder. Well, let's see. Lexington, Concord, Bunker Hill. And this one, we haven't talked about this as much, but England stopped the trade between colonies and Europe. Because England was the mama, they were able to say, nope, colonists, you can only send your goods back to us in England, nobody else. And you must buy all of your stuff from us, from boats from England. And the colonists didn't like being told who they could or could not buy from. And then the colonists said, we have a right to rebel against England because England had demanded taxes without letting the colonists agree or disagree. The idea of no taxation without representation. And finally, the Declaration of Independence makes the point that England sent soldiers to fight the colonists. The conclusion of the Declaration of Independence, then, is that the colonists had good reasons to change the government, and because of all of these good reasons, the 13 English colonies decided to be their own country, not part of England anymore. And here, this one is very important. They invited other countries, other nations, and yes, I do want you to write the word nations, in Europe to be our allies. What does that mean? Help us fight against England, the United Kingdom. Can you think of any nations who might be unhappy with the way recent wars have gone against England? Any nation who lost a whole bunch of their land that might want a chance to join with the colonists and get back at England? This picture here that's been off to the side is me standing in front of Independence Hall. I know. Hopefully you haven't gotten a crooked neck from looking at it. This is another view of what Independence Hall looks like. Much better lighting, right? That's a professional photograph. That would be. So I was standing right here. And this is actually redone. It's the original place, but it's not the original floor and so forth, because in a little bit we'll talk about some battles where the British Army takes over Philadelphia, and they so hated the place where the Declaration of Independence was signed, they turned it into, well, let's just say it got really, really nasty and icky inside. You can do the research and find out what turned it into. The thing that I want to leave you with today, and again, if this video does not play, I will link it up on the website separately. But this is really cool because, if it'll let me do what I want to, this is really cool because it shows you sort of some behind the scenes with the Declaration of Independence. Oops.
Hi, I'm Kitty Nicholson. I'm Supervisory Conservator at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. In 1952, the Declaration of Independence came to the National Archives. It was on display constantly through the intervening decades. There was a need to do a major renovation of the National Archives building. We knew it was our one window of opportunity to go in and to take the documents off display, do conservation treatment, and design new encasements. There was no manual on how to open the encasements. They'd been sealed with the intention they'd be sealed in perpetuity. We were able to use a sharp cutting tool to cut through a lead ribbon that held the top and bottom pieces of glass together. Then there was a free-floating piece of glass directly against the parchment. Will something stick to the glass? You don't know when something's been in contact for 50 years. Is it going to stick? Is it not? But it lifted off cleanly, and as we lifted off the inner glass, we saw the Declaration again for the first time in almost 50 years. In the new encasement design, the document rests on a platform. The platform is black, and the encasement interior is black, and so the effect is that the parchment is floating in this black surround. There is a mystery on the Declaration of Independence. At the bottom left corner, right here, you can see fingerprints. There's a faint gray impression of a handprint. And we really don't have any good historical evidence for whose handprint it is or when it happened. We would love to see a large 19th century photograph of the Declaration to see if that handprint was there. So if you've got an old photograph kicking around, let us know. And if you can come and see with your family, see that handprint, that is the true mystery of the Declaration.
So yes, you can go and see the Declaration of Independence. And this is not letting me. There we go. Get out of here. So if you have a chance to go see the Declaration of Independence, it is on display in Washington, D.C. And now you'll know to look for that handprint in the left side. The information that we got today, make sure that you have everything on this sheet that I showed you. And then you'll need to trim it down a bit neater than I'm doing at the moment. And this will need to get layered on page 23. Layer it so that you can see both pages, but you won't be able to see the entirety of the second page. So this page will go on top, and then you'll trim down the second page. so that you can tape it underneath. And you'll notice I trimmed them both down before I taped anything. This needs to go on page 23. Declaration of, oops. There, that's how it needs to be. Declaration of Independence. Make sure that you are working to memorize the Declaration of Independence, mostly by Thomas Jefferson, written July 4th, 1776. In order to get an A, you have to say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Do you say that much? That only earns you a C. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That gets you a B. Deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. All of it gets you an A. And this is a large grade. This is worth as much as a test because it is important as an American citizen that you know what at least part of the Declaration of Independence says.